I'm your dream companion, the one who helps you unwind after a long, busy day. Before you drift off to sleep, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments, where are you listening from right now? What time is it there? Now take a deep breath, get comfortable in bed, and come with me because the night is just beginning, and this story is all yours. November 6th, 1983. The small town of Hawkins, Indiana, lay quiet under the chilly night. Only the whispering wind through the trees and the distant rustle of leaves. Breaking the silence, young Will Byers, a boy with tousled brown hair and a worn backpack, pedaled slowly back home after a disappointing session of Dungeons and Dragons at a friend's house. He was lost in thought, replaying the challenges of the game and the bitter taste of defeat. The streets were almost empty. Only the occasional car passed, its headlights cutting through the darkness with soft yellow beams. The damp scent of the nearby forest clung to the air, and a strange sense of unease prickled Will's skin, though he tried to shake it off. As Will rode down the familiar roads, shadows seemed to stretch unnaturally across the pavement, shifting as if they had a life of their own. He tightened his grip on the handlebars, ears straining for any sound other than the soft crunch of tires on wet leaves. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a dark figure, sudden and imposing, standing silently at the edge of the forest. Will froze for a moment, heart hammering in his chest. The figure didn't move like a person. Its shape was humanoid but distorted, with long, unnerving limbs that seemed to blend into the darkness. Panic surged, and he pedaled faster, desperate to escape the unseen danger. Will turned down a narrow alley, hoping to lose whoever or whatever was following him. But every shadow seemed alive, pressing in closer. He ducked behind a stack of crates near the back of a convenience store, holding his breath and trying to calm the rising fear in his chest. The air smelled of wet concrete and cold metal, and the distant sound of dripping water echoed like a warning. He peeked around the corner, but the street was empty again. Relief was fleeting. Before he could move, the dark figure reappeared, silently, almost impossibly, between the trees and the lamplight, and in a blink, Will Byers was gone. Meanwhile, back in Hawkins, the disappearance did not go unnoticed. Will's friends Mike Wheeler, Dustin Henderson, and Lucas Sinclair quickly realized something was wrong when he failed to return home. Concern and fear drove them into the dark, cold streets and toward the edge of the nearby forest, their flashlights cutting through the night like thin beams of hope. Each step they took seemed to echo in the silence, as if the forest itself was aware of their intrusion. It was there, in that foreboding shadowed woodland, that they would encounter something extraordinary. A girl with a shaved head, wearing nothing but a hospital gown, silent yet terrifyingly powerful. She would soon be known as 11, and she carried secrets and abilities that would change their lives forever. The next morning, the town of Hawkins buzzed with rumors and worry. Joyce Byers, Will's mother, paced her small living room, eyes wide and hands trembling, convinced that her son was trying to reach her in some way. Every flicker of a light, every hum of the old refrigerator, made her heart race. She taped Christmas lights across the walls, hoping, somehow, that Will could communicate through them. The strings of multicolored bulbs cast an eerie glow, their soft twinkle like the fragile heartbeat of hope in the dark. Joyce whispered to the empty room, her voice shaking. "Will, if you can hear me, blink once for yes, blink twice for no." She waited, breath caught, as a single light flickered faintly. Relief and terror battled within her. Simultaneously, her son was alive, somewhere, but trapped in a nightmare she could hardly understand. At the same time, Mike, Dustin, and Lucas were busy planning their search for Will, using bits of knowledge from their favorite games. They devised Operation Mirkwood, a careful mission to find and rescue him. Lucas brought an army of supplies from his father's old Vietnam gear, while Dustin packed food and gadgets. They argued quietly about the girl they had encountered in the foresty Lebanon and whether her strange abilities could truly help. Mike, always the leader, tried to stay calm as he explained the plan, giving 11 a watch so she could understand meeting times. Despite her confusion, 11's sharp, mysterious eyes reflected a mix of fear and curiosity, hinting that she already sensed more than she let on. Meanwhile, Nancy Wheeler, Mike's older sister, faced her own storm. At a pool party hosted by her boyfriend, Steve Harrington, she felt out of place and restless. Her best friend, Barb Holland, accompanied her reluctantly, unaware that danger lurked closer than they imagined. Jonathan Byers, Will's older brother, attended the same party with his camera, quietly documenting moments he felt were strange or telling. As the night unfolded, Barb wandered too far, and the shadows shifted around her. Without warning, she was pulled into a dark and wet world beneath the surface, a version of reality twisted and alive, the domain of a creature unlike anything she had ever imagined. Nancy caught glimpses of terror, but by the time she realized the danger, Barb was gone and only a haunting memory remained. In Hawkins, Chief Jim Hopper began piecing together the puzzle. He had always distrusted the nearby laboratory, but now suspicion sharpened into resolve. A torn hospital apron and inconsistencies in the labs. Security footage led him to believe that more sinister forces were at work. Meanwhile, Jonathan examined the photographs he had taken at the party, noticing subtle, almost impossible details: a shadow here, a shape there, hinting at the presence of something beyond comprehension. As darkness and fear spread through the town, these threads: Joyce's desperate hope, the boy's determination, Nancy's growing dread, and Hopper's suspicion began to intertwine. Each step forward drew them deeper into the mystery, and closer to the terrifying truth that lurked beyond the ordinary world. In the shadowed dimension they would come to know as the Upside Down. The afternoon in Hawkins carried a restless tension, as if the town itself could sense the presence of something unnatural. Joyce Byers sat by the tangled Christmas lights, her hands trembling as she rearranged them, hoping to send a clear message to Will. Each flicker of a bulb made her jump. Each shadow in the corners of the room seemed alive. She whispered softly, "Will, can you hear me? Blink for yes, blink twice for no." Her voice barely above a sigh. Slowly, carefully, one of the lights flickered. Her heart skipped, a mixture of fear and relief flooding her chest. She rushed to the window, scanning the streets and the forest beyond, desperate to see him, desperate to feel some tangible connection. It was as if the lights themselves were a lifeline across worlds, the fragile thread that linked a mother to her missing child. Every pulse of electricity was a heartbeat, every glow a sign that her son was somewhere, watching, waiting, unable to speak but yearning to be heard. Meanwhile, in the forest, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin tried to navigate the thick trees, their backpacks heavy with supplies and their minds heavier with worry. 11, small and fragile looking, but sharp and determined, followed closely behind them. She had begun to understand that these boys were more than just friends. They were her allies, her first real connection to a world outside the sterile, white walls of the laboratory. Mike explained their plan in quiet, urgent tones, pointing to areas where Will might be hiding or where the creature might have passed. Lucas, his skepticism still strong, questioned 11's abilities, testing her patience. Dustin, ever the optimist, encouraged them all to keep going, to trust in what seemed impossible. Despite their fears, the boys pressed forward, led by hope and the subtle, terrifying understanding that the normal rules of their world no longer applied. The forest seemed to close in around them, the trees whispering secrets in the wind, shadows moving just beyond sight, as if the Upside Down itself was watching their every step. At the same time, Nancy Wheeler's unease grew, twisting into something sharper, more insistent. The pool party had left her with more questions than answers. Steve Harrington, with his charm and confidence, tried to calm her nerves, but she could not shake the feeling that something was wrong, that Barb's absence was no accident. Jonathan Byers, camera in hand, became her reluctant partner in investigation. Together, they retraced steps, examining the photographs Jonathan had taken. Each image revealed subtle anomalies: a blurred figure here, an unnatural shape there that hinted at a presence beyond human understanding. The feeling of being watched, of being stalked, grew stronger with every moment. Shadows lengthened unnaturally, the air seemed to thicken, and the ordinary sounds of Hawkins, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of leaves became sinister warnings. Nancy's determination hardened. She could not sit by while her friend was lost. She would follow these signs wherever they led, even if it meant stepping into a darkness that threatened to consume her. Hopper, now more certain than ever of the laboratory's connection to the town's strangeness, began to dig deeper. He sifted through security footage, interviewed staff, and examined the torn apron left near the lab's perimeter. Each discovery seemed to pull him closer to a truth he could barely comprehend. Will's disappearance, the strange girl in the forest, the otherworldly creature, none of it was coincidental. In the library archives, he unearthed reports of secret experiments, mentions of a project called MK, and names that resonated like echoes from a hidden past. Terry Ives, a woman claiming her daughter had been taken by the lab, became a focal point in his growing investigation. As the pieces slowly fell into place, Hopper realized the danger was far greater than a simple missing child case. It was a confrontation with something beyond the natural world, something ancient, predatory, and clever. The threads connecting Joyce, the children, Nancy, Jonathan, and the laboratory began to form a web, delicate yet unyielding, pulling each of them toward an inevitable collision with the upside. Down, fear and determination intertwined, driving every step, every decision, every desperate attempt to reach those trapped in a world where darkness was alive and nothing could be trusted. Joyce Byers felt the weight of the unknown pressing down on her. Every flicker of the Christmas lights seemed to carry a message she could barely understand, a code from a world she could not see. Her hands shook as she adjusted the strings, the tiny bulbs illuminating her anxious face in a staccato rhythm of hope and fear. Will's presence was there, faint but undeniable, each blink of the lights confirming he was alive somewhere, trapped in a place no mother should ever imagine. She called out softly, her voice quivering, "Will, I'm here. I'm listening. Can you spell for me?" And then, slowly, painstakingly, the lights danced in response, forming letters that spelled his name. Tears blurred her vision as she realized the truth. She had been both dreading and praying for her son was alive, and she could reach him, even if only through the fragile medium of light and electricity. In the dense, shadowed forest, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin continued their search, guided by the quiet, mysterious presence of the girl's abilities, both awe-inspiring and terrifying, allowed them glimpses into a reality they were not meant to understand. Mike clutched her hand as they navigated the twisted undergrowth, and for a moment, the fear that had been gnawing at them all softened into determination. They shared whispered conversations about strategy, about what they might face, but most of all, about trust. 11, who had known only the sterile walls of Hawkins' lab and the cruel demands of Dr. Brenner, began to learn what it meant to belong somewhere, to fight not just for herself but for friends who had chosen to stand beside her. Every snapped twig, every distant cry of an unseen creature, sent shivers down their spines, reminding them that the forest was alive with more than ordinary danger. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan pieced together the unsettling puzzle of Barb's disappearance. The photographs Jonathan had taken during the pool party revealed disturbing anomalies that defied explanation, subtle hints of the monstrous presence they had yet to fully confront. Nancy's anxiety had grown into a burning resolve. She refused to be passive in the face of terror. Each shadow that moved across her path, each rustle in the trees, seemed to mirror the unrest in her mind. She confided in Jonathan, and together they began to trace the invisible threads that connected the town's strange occurrences to the hidden horrors lurking just beyond sight. Their fear was tempered by determination. Their caution was balanced with action. Every step they took drew them closer to the confrontation that was waiting, a moment where courage would be measured not by absence of fear, but by the willingness to face it. Hopper, piecing together evidence from the lab and the strange reports surrounding Hawkins, felt a growing dread in the pit of his stomach. The torn apron, the missing files, the vague testimonies of witnesses, it all painted a picture of something monstrous and deeply controlled. As he reviewed security footage and cross-referenced newspaper articles, he realized that the laboratory had been hiding far more than illegal experiments. It had been tampering with realities, bridging gaps between worlds, and manipulating the lives of the townspeople without their knowledge. He understood that Will's disappearance was only the beginning, that the events unfolding were part of a larger, darker plan that threatened not just a boy, but the fragile safety of Hawkins itself. Every discovery deepened his resolve. He could not ignore the patterns forming before his eyes. The danger was vast, the stakes impossibly high, but Hopper's determination to protect the innocent, Will, and even the children propelled him forward, into a confrontation with horrors beyond comprehension. The tension in Hawkins grew heavier with each passing hour, as the threads connecting the missing children, the laboratory, and the monstrous presence tightened into a web of fear and uncertainty. Joyce Byers, driven by maternal instinct and an unyielding belief in the impossible, continued to communicate with Will through the flickering light. Each blink, each pattern, became a lifeline between mother and son, a fragile connection, spanning the void of a world that was not meant to be touched by human hands. She painstakingly arranged the letters of the alphabet on the walls, her hands moving with both desperation and careful precision. With every word Will spelled out, Joyce's hope grew, but so did her dread. The realization that he was alive and conscious, yet trapped in a realm she could not enter, filled her with both determination and helplessness. It was a delicate balance of faith and fear, one that she bore alone in the quiet darkness of her living room. The hum of electricity around her, punctuating the silence with a rhythm that spoke of life and survival. Meanwhile, in the hidden corners of Hawkins, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin forged ahead with their search, guided by the strange, almost supernatural abilities of 11. She led them through the shadowed forest with a mix of caution and intuition, her senses attuned to the unseen dangers lurking just beyond sight. The boys followed closely, hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and exhilaration, each step bringing them closer to the source of the town's darkness. Lucas carried his father's old military supplies, a makeshift arsenal against the unknown, while Dustin kept a careful watch on their his curiosity pushing him to notice details the others overlooked. Mike, driven by loyalty and the desire to protect both his friends and 11, silently vowed to face whatever horrors lay ahead. The forest seemed alive with whispers and movement, the shadows shifting as though aware of the intruders, and every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves reminded the children of the precariousness of their mission. Yet, despite the fear, there was a sense of unity, a bond formed in the crucible of shared danger that propelled them forward with cautious resolve. In another part of town, Nancy Wheeler and Jonathan Byers intensified their investigation, the photograph fragments from the pool party serving as both evidence and warning. As Nancy pieced together the visual clues, she discovered subtle distortions and figures that suggested the presence of something beyond human comprehension. Jonathan, ever meticulous, examined the shadows and reflections, connecting dots that seemed invisible to others. Their shared fear evolved into purpose, a determination to uncover the truth and confront the malevolent force threatening their town. The dynamic between them deepened as well, each finding in the other a rare source of understanding and support. They moved cautiously, aware that the creature or creatures they sought were not merely dangerous, but intelligent and unpredictable. Every step, every observation, brought them closer to the inevitable confrontation, sharpening both their fear and their courage. The shadows of Hawkins hid more than secrets. They hid a reflection of the town's deepest anxieties, a mirror of the unknown that challenged their very perception of reality. Jim Hopper, driven by a combination of instinct, guilt, and determination, pieced together the fractured evidence of Hawkins National Laboratories, hidden horrors, the torn apron, the missing files, and the testimonies of frightened witnesses painted a disturbing picture of secret experiments and human exploitation. He understood that Will's disappearance was not an isolated event, but part of a larger, insidious scheme that threatened the safety of the entire town. As Hopper analyzed the footage and cross-referenced reports, he began to recognize the patterns of deception, the manipulation of reality, and the manipulation of children like 11 for purposes he could barely comprehend. His sense of duty intensified, the urgency of action pressing upon him with every discovery. Hopper knew that the line between the ordinary and the supernatural had been crossed, that the stakes were now life and death, and that the fragile safety of Hawkins rested in the hands of a few brave individuals, willing to confront what others could not. Every decision, every risk he took, was a step closer to the unknown, and yet he could not turn away, not when the innocent were in peril and the town itself teetered on the edge of an unimaginable threat. The night deepened over Hawkins, and the eerie calm was only a facade, hiding the chaos that the Upside Down had already begun to seep into the town. Joyce, still focused on communicating with Will, noticed the patterns in the lights shifting faster than before, as though Will was growing desperate. Her hands trembled as she pointed to the letters, urging him to spell out his location, any detail, anything that could guide her and Hopper. Each flicker was a heartbeat of the unknown, a message from a world that defied logic and reason. The walls of her home seemed to pulse with the energy of the other realm, casting elongated shadows that twisted with an unnatural fluidity. Joyce felt the presence of the creature close, a cold weight pressing against the edges of reality, but her determination was unwavering. She whispered words of comfort to Will, her voice trembling, a soft anchor of humanity amidst the terrifying chaos that threatened to engulf both worlds. Meanwhile, 11 guided Mike, Lucas, and Dustin with a precision that belied her age. Every step they took through the dense woods was calculated, with 11 extending her senses to detect the faintest tremors of the Upside Down bleeding into their reality. The forest seemed to warp around them, shadows growing and shrinking, whispering their fears back to them with an uncanny clarity. Lucas gripped his wrist rocket tightly, the weapon a feeble attempt to impose control over the uncontrollable. Dustin's eyes darted constantly, cataloging the strange sounds, shapes, and movements around them. Each observation, a piece of the puzzle that might save Will. Mike, whose heart was as restless as his mind, kept close to 11, watching her every expression, reading the subtle hints of fear and determination in her eyes. Their unity, forged in friendship and desperation, became a shield against the darkness pressing in from every side, a fragile barrier in a night that seemed determined to swallow them whole. At the outskirts of town, Nancy and Jonathan worked tirelessly to connect the dots left by the laboratory and the sinister force that had claimed Barb and threatened Will. The photograph fragments, once small and seemingly inconsequential, revealed glimpses of shadows and forms that defied comprehension. Nancy's anxiety sharpened into focus as she realized that the creature's presence could be traced through the distortions captured by Jonathan's camera. Each discovery increased the weight of responsibility on their shoulders, and yet it also strengthened their resolve. They moved through Hawkins with caution, knowing that the creature's intelligence was as dangerous as its physical power. Every step forward was fraught with peril, every shadow potentially concealing death. Their partnership, fueled by shared fear and a growing trust, became a lifeline, an unspoken promise to protect each other and the missing children, to face the horrors that others would never understand. Inside the dimly lit halls of Hawkins National Laboratory, Hopper pieced together the puzzle of human experiments gone horribly wrong. The fragments of evidence, from missing reports to witness accounts, formed a damning picture of Martin Brown's manipulation and exploitation of children like 11. The sense of urgency was palpable. The longer Will remained trapped, the thinner the line between life and death became. Hopper's mind raced as he realized the reach extended further than anyone had imagined, a web of secrecy that ensnared the entire town. He prepared himself, knowing that confrontation was inevitable, that action must be taken swiftly to prevent further tragedy. As he studied the patterns, connections, and evidence, the weight of responsibility settled on him heavily, each decision carrying immense consequences. Hopper understood that in Hawkins, the ordinary rules no longer applied, and that survival required courage, intellect, and a willingness to confront the unimaginable. Every calculated move brought him closer to uncovering the truth, and closer to a confrontation that would change everything. The storm outside Hawkins seemed endless that night, the sound of rain blending with the low hum of electricity as destiny drew every thread of the story together. Joyce and Hopper, united by desperation and courage, broke into Hawkins National Laboratory under the cover of darkness. The sterile halls echoed with the weight of their footsteps, every fluorescent light flickering as if reacting to their intrusion. Hopper's jaw was set with grim determination, while Joyce's eyes burned with maternal fury. When they finally reached the portal, an impossible tear in the fabric of reality, they felt the pull of another world pressing against them, whispering in frequencies just beyond hearing. They stepped into the darkness without hesitation, swallowed whole by the shifting mist and the damp, alien air of the Upside Down. Each breath they took inside that world was heavy, the smell of decay and electricity filling their lungs. And in that suffocating gloom, they pressed on, guided only by the faint echoes of Will's cries. In the cold, mirrored landscape of the Upside Down, Joyce and Hopper found Will trapped in a grotesque imitation of his own world, his body entwined with the parasitic tendrils of the creature's nest. The scene was silent except for the faint buzz of static energy vibrating in the air. Hopper's memories surged his daughter in a hospital bed, the helplessness of watching her fade. That pain became his strength now. He ripped the tendrils away with trembling hands, while Joyce, her tears mixing with the soot and blood on her face, breathed Will's name over and over. The boy's chest was still, but Joyce refused to give in. "Come on, baby," she whispered, shaking him gently. "You come back to me." Hopper began chest compressions, his breath ragged, the urgency of life and death collapsing into one. Then, at last, Will gasped a fragile sound, but alive. Joyce let out a cry that was half laughter, half sob, as they embraced in the darkness of that cruel, inverted world. Together, they carried him out, stumbling toward the faint glow that marked the way home. Meanwhile, in the real world, Eleven and the boys made their stand at the Hawkins Middle School. The air was thick with fear and dust, the fluorescent lights flickering wildly as the Demogorgon drew near. 11 stood before her friends Mike Lucas, and dust in her small frame, trembling, but her eyes burning with resolve. She was tired, drained, yet filled with an untouchable power born from love and pain. The walls shook as the creature entered, its growls echoing like thunder. The children froze, their courage hanging by a thread, but 11 stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Go," she whispered. "I'll stop it." Mike's tearful protest broke the silence, but she only smiled a faint, sad smile and turned to face the monster. The power within her surged, every emotion, fear, rage, hope igniting into something luminous, with a scream that tore through both worlds. She thrust her hands forward, pinning the creature to the wall. Light exploded around them, a brilliant, shattering glow that swallowed the Demogorgon whole. For one brief moment, Mike saw her turn, whisper goodbye, and then she was consumed by her own sacrifice. Days later, Hawkins began to heal, though scars lingered like whispers in the wind. Will was home, pale but safe, surrounded by family and friends who spoke softly, as if afraid to break the fragile calm. Hopper moved quietly through town, his eyes haunted by memories he could never speak aloud. On a cold gray morning, he carried a box of waffles into the woods, leaving them gently beneath a fallen log-in offering to the ghost of a girl who had saved them all. Nancy, Jonathan, and Steve returned to their lives, changed in ways they could not yet understand, their bonds tested and reshaped by everything they had endured. And the boys Mike Lucas and Dustin gathered once more in the basement to play their game of Dungeons and Dragons. Though the laughter now carried a weight it never had before. The dice rolled, the candles flickered, and for a moment, life felt almost normal again. But late one night, as Will stood alone in the bathroom, a quiet unease crept back into his chest. He coughed, bending over the sink, and from his mouth came a slick, black slug that slid down the drain, writhing as it disappeared. For a second, the world around him flickered, the bathroom turning cold, the lights dimming, and he saw it, upside down, shadowed and endless, waiting just beyond the veil. Then it was gone, replaced once more by the warm, safe glow of home. Will stared at his reflection, his heartbeat steady but his eyes uncertain. Outside, the rain began to fall again, soft and endless, as if Hawkins itself was holding its breath, waiting for what would come next. The rain fell quietly over Hawkins that October night, a sleepy town wrapped in orange lights and Halloween decorations. Pumpkins glowed on porches, their carved smiles flickering with candlelight, but out on the farmlands, those same pumpkins were rotting from the inside, collapsing into gray mush. Sheriff Jim Hopper stood under his hat, rain dripping down his coat as he stared at the dying crops. "It's not the weather," the farmer muttered nervously beside him. "It's something else." Hopper didn't answer. The air carried a strange, metallic smell, and the cornstalks whispered like voices. Deep down, Hopper knew Hawkins had never truly recovered from the darkness of last year. The things that came from the other side, the monsters, the lost children, and now, something was stirring again. Meanwhile, in the small arcade downtown, the neon lights buzzed as Will Byers and his friends gathered around the Dig Dug machine. Their laughter filled the room, echoing beneath the hum of old game consoles. Dustin's fingers moved fast, but when the high score flashed on screen, Mad Max's face fell. "Who the hell is Mad Max?" he complained. Lucas smirked, pretending not to care, but Mike was distracted. He watched Will standing quietly near the window, staring outside. For a moment, the world seemed to flicker. The reflection of rain turned into gray ash. Everyone in the arcade disappeared, leaving only silence. Will blinked, and suddenly he was somewhere else. The floor was black like tar, and the air pulsed with thunder. Red lightning illuminated a sky filled with a monstrous shadow, a creature with legs like smoke, stretching across the horizon. Will gasped. Then, a voice faint. "Far away, Will. You okay?" It was Mike. The world snapped back, colors returned, and the game sounds resumed. But Will couldn't shake the chill. Something had called to him again. That night, Joyce Byers tucked her son into bed, trying to hide the fear behind her tired smile. "Just nightmares," she told him softly, brushing his hair away from his face. But Will couldn't sleep. The shadows on his wall stretched and moved, whispering things he couldn't understand. Somewhere far from Hawkins, in a dark cabin hidden deep in the woods, a young girl sat by candlelight. Her hair was short now, and her eyes reflected the flame-like glass. Eleven listened to the sound of the rain hitting the roof, her mind quiet but restless. Hopper had told her to stay inside, to keep safe, but she missed Mike every night. She tried to reach him, closing her eyes, breathing slow, slipping into that black, endless void. "Mike," she whispered into the darkness. On the other side of town, a boy sitting under a blanket fort lifted his head, his old walkie-talkie buzzing faintly. "El," he said, barely breathing. But the sound faded, leaving only the rain, tapping softly against the window, as if the storm itself was listening. Morning crept slowly into Hawkins, but the gray sky refused to brighten. The pumpkins on Merrill Wright's farm had turned completely black overnight, spreading a foul smell across the fields. Sheriff Hopper stood beside his truck, staring at the decay, his cigarette trembling slightly between his fingers. He didn't believe in curses, but this was something different. He crouched, touching the cold, slimy surface of a rotten pumpkin beneath it. The soil pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He froze, then stood up quickly, brushing his hands on his coat. Behind him, the corn rustled again, though there was no wind. Hopper didn't say a word. He simply turned to his deputy and said, "Mark the area. No one comes near this place until I say so." But as he left, the rain began again, heavier this time, washing away the tracks, and somewhere deep below the field, something moved. The rain hasn't stopped since that night. It drums softly on the roofs of Hawkins, as if the sky itself mourns Will's disappearance. Days have passed, and the once lively streets are now swallowed by a thick, humid fog. Mothers call their children earlier than usual, and fathers drive home faster, afraid of something they can't name. The sound of thunder blends with whispers, spreading through town, whispers of a boy taken by something that doesn't belong in this world. Joyce Byers hasn't slept. Her eyes are hollow, her hands tremble, but her voice carries a strange certainty. She insists she can hear Will, through the static of the phone, through the flicker of the lights. Every night, when the storm rises, she calls out to him, and the lights answer. In another part of town, Mike, Lucas, and Dustin refuse to give up. The three boys meet secretly in the woods, flashlights shaking in their hands, mud splashing on their sneakers. They search for clues, maps spread across the ground, their young voices echoing like distant ghosts. The forest is alive, every branch crack, every shadow moving just a little too slow. But they don't turn back. They're not just playing anymore. They're chasing something real. And then, in the pouring rain, they find her, a girl with a shaved head, standing alone in the middle of the storm. She doesn't speak much, only one word: "Oh." They take her home, hiding her in Mike's basement. The rain keeps falling, and the thunder grows closer, like footsteps approaching. 11, that's what the tattoo on her arm says, is unlike anyone they've ever met. She barely eats, barely speaks. But when she does, the lights flicker, the air hums, and objects tremble around her. Mike looks at her not with fear, but with wonder. He believes her when she says Will isn't dead. He believes the monster is real. As they talk, the storm outside grows heavier, matching the rising fear in their hearts. Somewhere out there, beyond the rain, something watches them, something hungry. At night, Joyce fills her house with Christmas lights. Desperate to communicate with her son, each bulb flickers like a heartbeat, answering her whispers. "Talk to me, Will," she pleads. And then, impossibly, he does. The lights spell out words, forming messages on her walls. "Run." Her breath catches. The rain outside crashes against the windows. Lightning flashes through the curtains, and she realizes she's not alone. Shadows twist in the corners, and from behind the wallpaper, a shape begins to emerge. Something stretching, something clawing its way into her world. The lights go out, only the sound of the storm remains, and Joyce Byers screams into the darkness, holding on to one impossible truth: her son is alive, but trapped somewhere beyond the rain. The storm outside has become constant, never-ending rhythm that blurs the line between day and night. Joyce no longer fears the thunder. She listens to it, searching for her son's voice hidden within each rumble. Her living room is now a glowing maze of Christmas lights, colors pulsing like living veins across the walls. Each flicker means something. Each burst of brightness could be Will trying to speak. The neighbors whisper that she's gone mad, that the grief has taken her mind. But Joyce doesn't care. In her heart, she knows the truth. Will is out there, trapped in a place where no mother should ever have to reach. One night, lightning illuminates the room, and for a second, she sees it, a shadowy figure pressed against the wall, moving as if breathing beneath the wallpaper. Her hand trembles as she reaches out, her fingers brushing the surface. It's cold, impossibly cold. And then, the wall moves. Meanwhile, deep in Mike's basement, the rain continues its lullaby on the windows. The kids sit close, the light of a single lamp casting long shadows. 11 sits quietly, her eyes distant, as if she's listening to something none of them can hear. When she finally speaks, her voice is soft but heavy. "Will, hiding, upside down." The boys look at each other, confused. "Upside down, like the world flipped?" Mike asks. 11 nods. She closes her eyes, her small hand trembling as drops of blood fall from her nose. The lights dim, the air grows thick, and for a brief, terrifying moment, they all see it, a vision of a world that mirrors theirs, but twisted, decayed, and filled with a suffocating darkness. When she opens her eyes, the vision fades, and the storm outside crashes louder, as if the other side has felt them watching. Sheriff Hopper, once skeptical, now follows the trail of strange occurrences. The rain has soaked through his hat and coat, but he keeps going, boots sinking into the mud as he reaches the Hawkins National Laboratory. Behind its steel gates, something sinister hums, an energy that crackles like lightning. The guards try to stop him, but Hopper knows there's something they're hiding. He's seen too many lies, too many frightened faces. Inside, he discovers files, secret experiments, and surveillance footage of 11, the same girl the boys found in the woods. His chest tightens as he realizes she was part of something much darker, something that tore a hole between worlds. The storm outside mirrors his thoughts, chaotic, unstoppable. Back at the buyer's house, Joyce can't hold back anymore. The whispers behind the walls are stronger now, louder. "Will," she cries, pressing her palm against the wallpaper. The lights flicker wildly, responding to her voice, and then, in a heartbeat, the wall bursts open like wet paper, revealing a pulsing, living membrane. On the other side, there's movement, a forest. Upside down, covered in ash and silence. She stares into it, her heart pounding, her breath shaky. She knows what she has to do. The rain pounds harder against the windows as she steps closer. The room hums. The lights flash one last time, and Joyce Byers disappears into the darkness, leaving only the echo of her voice and the soft, endless sound of rain. The night had fallen heavy over Hawkins, and the rain painted the streets with silver reflections. Dustin Henderson ran home through the storm, clutching something tight against his chest, a small, wriggling thing he had found inside a garbage can. His breath came in quick bursts, not just from the cold, but from the thrill of discovery. Once inside, he crept past his mother's room and rushed to his bedroom, his Ghostbusters trap still rattling. Carefully, he placed it in the aquarium beside his turtle and opened it. What he saw was unlike anything he had ever imagined. A small, amphibian creature, smooth and slimy, with no eyes and a wide, curious mouth. It made a soft clicking sound, like a tiny echo of another world. "You're beautiful," Dustin whispered. He smiled and tossed in a piece of candy, a Three Musketeers bar. The creature devoured it eagerly. "I'll call you Dart for short." Outside thunder rolled, and the lights flickered as if something had heard the name. Later that night, the rain grew stronger, whispering secrets against the windows. Dustin had fallen asleep with a book about reptiles resting on his chest, the soft hum of his lamp filling the room. Dart stirred in the aquarium, its small body trembling under the heat lamp. The creature's skin darkened, and for a moment, its reflection on the glass seemed to move on its own. Then, a sound, a low, unnatural hiss, filled the air. Dustin stirred, half asleep, unaware that the little creature was changing, growing, becoming something else. Outside, a flash of lightning revealed a shadow crawling across his window. The storm wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside, quiet and watching. At the same time, deep in the woods, Jim Hopper trudged through the mud, his flashlight slicing through the fog. The rain clung to his coat as he searched near a rotted pumpkin field, where something dark and foul had started to spread beneath the soil. He knelt down, touched the earth, and felt it pulse alive. He stood still, eyes narrowing, the storm crackling above him. Somewhere, far away, a soft voice echoed in his mind, "Will." The word carried through the thunder like a warning. Hopper turned his gaze toward the horizon, the rain running down his face. The town was changing again, and whatever was coming, it had already begun. The morning came gray and heavy, the storm still whispering over Hawkins. Dustin woke to the soft patter of rain on his window, his mind still foggy from dreams of rippling water and hollow eyes. He sat up slowly, rubbed his face, and turned toward the aquarium. The candy wrapper floated on the surface, but Dart was gone. His chest tightened as his eyes scanned the room. For a second, he thought he saw movement beneath the desk, a shadow that didn't belong to him. "Dart," he whispered. A wet sound answered him. When he finally crouched down, the small creature crawled out, slick and trembling, its mouth opening wider than before, revealing rows of tiny, sharp teeth. Dustin froze. The creature hissed softly but didn't attack. It only stared, as if it recognized him. "It's okay," he murmured, forcing a shaky smile. He scooped Dart up gently and placed it back into the tank. The creature curled into the corner, the faint glow of the lamp flickering against its slick skin. Across town, the sound of rain mixed with the hum of an old television. Joyce Byers sat on the couch, staring at Will. He was pale, his eyes distant, trapped in thoughts she couldn't reach. Every few moments, he blinked like he was waking from a nightmare he couldn't escape. "What do you see, honey?" she asked softly. Will hesitated. his small hands trembling. "It's cold," he said. "It's dark, and it's watching." Joyce felt the chill run through her spine, the way only a mother could when she knew her child wasn't imagining things. She pressed her hand to his cheek. He was freezing. The storm outside rattled the window, and for a heartbeat, the lights flickered. Somewhere beyond the walls, something pulsed, faint but real, like a heartbeat deep under the ground. 11 sat alone in her small room inside Hopper's cabin. The rain echoed on the roof like a soft drumbeat, steady and endless. She watched drops race down the glass and whispered to herself, "Mike." Her fingers traced invisible shapes in the air, remembering the static of the old radio, his voice breaking through the noise. She could almost hear him again, but Hopper's words returned, heavy and sharp. "You can't go outside." "Not yet." 11 clenched her fists. The walls felt too small, the cabin too quiet. The storm outside called to her, not with words, but with feeling, like a door opening in her mind. She stood, her eyes glowing faintly in the dim light, and with one deep breath, she stepped toward the window. The rain looked endless, and somewhere within it, she felt the pull of something familiar, something dangerous. The group descended the creaking stairs with their hearts pounding. The abandoned house seemed to breathe. Each step stirred dust and forgotten memories. In the basement, the darkness was almost solid, the air thick with mold and rust. Lucas aimed his flashlight at the far corner, and that's when they saw it, thick, pulsing cables, roots alive under the concrete, as if they had a heartbeat. Mike crouched down, trying to understand, but before he could touch them, a whisper came from behind. "You shouldn't be here." None of them turned around. The air grew heavy, and the sound seemed to come from inside the wall, echoing with something that wasn't human. Will stepped back, tripping over something metallic, a rusted bike, identical to the one he'd ridden before he vanished. A shiver ran through him. "That's not possible," he muttered. The basement seemed to respond with a low thud, like a breath coming from the ground itself. The light flickered, and for a split second they saw a tall, faceless shadow hanging from the ceiling, watching them. Dustin tried to stay calm, mumbling about electromagnetic fields and parallel dimensions. But the truth was clear. None of them could move. That thing was alive, and it was staring right at them. Suddenly, Dustin's radio began to crackle, spitting out a low hypnotic frequency. Through the static came a faint child's voice calling for help. "Mike, help." It was 11's voice. The blood drained from their faces. "She's trapped in there," said Mike, eyes wide. "But where is there?" asked Lucas, trembling. The answer came as a roar from another world, like the air itself had been torn apart. The light bulbs burst, plunging the basement into total darkness. Then the ground began to tremble. A crack split open beneath their feet, revealing a deep, glowing fissure, a portal. The same eerie blue light they'd seen before seeped out like living smoke. "We have to get out of here," shouted Dustin. But Mike hesitated. Something was calling him, a whisper, soft, familiar, almost comforting. He took a step forward, drawn toward it, while the voices in the radio multiplied, screaming, begging not to be left behind. 11 stood in the dark mirror of reality, the upside down. The air was thick and cold, filled with floating dust that glowed faintly like dying fireflies. Her bare feet touched the ground, which pulsed like skin, and the silence was alive with whispers. She could feel them creatures moving just beyond the mist, watching her every step. In her hand, she still held the photograph of her friends, now damp and torn. "Mike," she whispered, her voice trembling but full of hope. She closed her eyes, focusing, reaching through the static of the dimension that separated them. For a moment, she could hear the faint echo of rain from the other side, the comforting sound of the real world so close, yet impossibly far. Then, the silence broke. A sound like tearing metal filled the air, and the shadows began to move. Something vast was approaching, an enormous shape crawling across the ceiling, its limbs bending in unnatural angles. 11 froze. She could feel its hunger, its emptiness. This was the creature she had unleashed when she tore the first rift, the thing that had been waiting ever since. She tried to close her eyes and focus, to summon the power inside her, but fear clouded her mind. Her nose began to bleed. The world shook as the creature leaned closer, its faceless head dripping with a thick, black liquid. "Go away," she whispered. Her voice echoed across both worlds at once. In the normal world, Mike felt a sharp pain behind his eyes, as if her words had reached him. He grabbed the walkie-talkie and screamed, "Elle, where are you?" Static replied at first, but then her voice came through, distorted and distant. "Don't come. It's coming for you too." Mike turned to the others. "We can't leave her there." Lucas shook his head. "We don't even know how to get there." But Will, his face pale, looked at the basement wall, the same pulsating texture they'd seen before. Maybe I do." The lights flickered violently as Will placed his hand on the wall. His body tensed, eyes rolling back. For a second, the room filled with that same humming sound, the sound of two worlds overlapping. The wall began to melt, revealing a dark corridor behind it. The smell of decay spread fast. Mike didn't hesitate. "Hold on, Elle," he whispered, stepping forward as thunder rolled outside. Rain poured down, drumming against the house, drowning out the sound of the static and the distant screams echoing from the other side. The line between dreams and nightmares was gone now. Only the storm remained,